The champagne flutes made a crystalline sound when they touched, delicate, expensive, the kind of noise that happens in rooms where people wear watches worth more than my annual salary. Congratulations echoed around the private dining room, bouquets of words directed at my sister Victoria as she accepted praise for her promotion to Senior Vice President of Marketing at Pemberton Industries. I stood near the back wall, holding sparkling water in a glass identical to everyone else's champagne flutes, dressed in the only blazer I owned that didn't have ink stains on the cuffs. The scent of white truffle and seared duck breast floated through the air, mixing with expensive perfumes and the particular smell of new money trying to perform old elegance. Then my throat began to close. It started as a tickle, the kind you might dismiss as the beginning of a cough. But I'd lived with severe shellfish allergies my entire life. I knew the difference between a tickle and the first whisper of anaphylaxis. My tongue started swelling. My lips began to tingle and burn. I reached for my purse, fumbling for my EpiPen, but my fingers were already clumsy, my vision beginning to tunnel at the edges. The sound that came out of my throat wasn't a cough, it was a wheeze, wet and desperate. Victoria turned toward me, her expression shifting from radiant to annoyed in the space between heartbeats. "Natalie, don't." I tried to speak, to tell her I was dying, but only a choking sound emerged. "Seriously?" Victoria's voice carried across the suddenly quiet room. "You can't let me have one night? One single night without making it about you?" My knees buckled. I grabbed the edge of a chair, trying to stay upright, trying to reach my purse that had fallen to the floor. The wheezing grew louder, more desperate. I could feel people staring, could sense their discomfort, but no one moved to help. "She does this," Victoria announced to the room, her voice clear and authoritative. "She's always been dramatic. Attention-seeking since we were children." My vision was going dark at the edges. I was going to die while my sister performed for an audience. Then a voice cut through the room like a scalpel. "Someone call 911. Now." Harrison Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Archival Solutions, the most respected name in document preservation on the East Coast, the man who'd spent 20 minutes talking to me about medieval manuscript conservation techniques before dinner, was suddenly at my side. He moved with the precision of someone who'd handled emergencies before, his hand already reaching into his jacket pocket. "I have an EpiPen," he said, his voice calm but urgent. "Natalie, I'm going to administer epinephrine. Nod if you understand." I managed the smallest movement of my head. The injection burned through my thigh like liquid fire, but almost immediately, I could feel my throat opening, air rushing back into my lungs in ragged, painful gasps. Harrison kept his hand on my shoulder, steady and grounding. "Breathe slowly. The paramedics are coming. You're going to be fine." Victoria stood frozen, her face pale, her mouth slightly open. Harrison looked up at her, and his expression was something I'd never seen directed at my sister before, absolute horror, mixed with cold, assessing disgust. "What the hell did you give her?" he asked, his voice quiet but carrying. But I had no idea what was coming next. Let me back up to explain how I ended up at my sister's celebration dinner in the first place, and why Harrison Whitmore knew I needed epinephrine before anyone else in that room understood what was happening. I'm a rare books conservator. It's the kind of profession that makes people's eyes glaze over at parties when I try to explain what I do. I spend my days in a climate-controlled workshop in the basement of the Preservation Institute, working with documents that are sometimes 500 years old, repairing damage caused by time, moisture, insects, improper handling, and human carelessness. I work with fragile things. I know how to protect them. My sister Victoria, on the other hand, worked in marketing, a field our parents understood and valued. She wore designer suits, attended networking events, spoke confidently in rooms full of powerful people. She was the golden child, the success story, the daughter they bragged about at their country club. I was the weird one who worked with dead people's books. The dinner was supposed to celebrate Victoria's promotion to SVP at Pemberton Industries, a cosmetics conglomerate with offices in 12 countries. Our parents had insisted I attend, despite my protests that I had a deadline for a restoration project, a 1543 herbal manuscript with water damage and friable parchment that required delicate attention. "Family comes first, Natalie," my mother had said on the phone, her voice carrying that particular tone that meant disagreement wasn't an option. "Victoria specifically requested that you be there." It would mean so much to her. That should have been my first warning. Victoria never specifically requested my presence anywhere. But I went, because that's what I did. I showed up. I smiled. I stood quietly in corners and let Victoria shine. The dinner was at Augustine's, a 3-star restaurant where reservations required 3 months' notice and connections. The private dining room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, crystal chandeliers that cast everything in warm amber light, and place settings that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I arrived exactly on time, wearing my best blazer over a simple dress, my hair pulled back in the neat bun I wore to work. Victoria was already there, resplendent in a cream silk suit that probably cost $4,000, holding court with a circle of colleagues and executives. She saw me enter and her smile tightened almost imperceptibly at the corners. I'd learned to read those micro-expressions over 26 years of being her sister. "Natalie," she called out, her voice bright and false. "Come meet everyone. This is my little sister, she works with old books." The way she said it made my profession sound like a hobby, something quaint and unserious. I shook hands, smiled politely, accepted a glass of sparkling water from a server who looked concerned when I specified no ice, no garnish, just water. I'd learned to be specific about what I consumed in public spaces. My shellfish allergy wasn't the mild kind that gave you hives, it was the kind that could kill me in under 10 minutes without immediate medical intervention. Victoria knew this. We'd grown up together. She'd watched me go to the emergency room twice as a child, had been there the time I nearly died at a friend's birthday party because someone's mother thought just a little bit of shrimp paste wouldn't hurt anyone. I always carried 2 EpiPens. Always. The dinner proceeded with the careful choreography of corporate celebration. Speeches were made. Victoria glowed under the attention, accepting congratulations with perfectly practiced humility. I stood near the back, trying to be invisible, mentally calculating how soon I could leave without causing offense. Then Harrison Whitmore arrived, late, apologetic, explaining that he'd been caught on a call with a museum in Florence about a Dante manuscript. I knew who he was, of course. Everyone in document preservation knew Harrison Whitmore. He was a legend in our field, the man who'd revolutionized archival storage solutions and built a multi-million-dollar company from technical expertise and genuine passion for preservation. What I didn't expect was for him to recognize me. "Natalie Brennan," he said, his face lighting up. "I read your article in the Journal of Paper Conservation about the leaf casting technique for fills in vellum. Absolutely brilliant work." I felt my face flush with pleasure and surprise. "Thank you. Your work on climate control systems has saved countless collections." We fell into conversation immediately, the kind of detailed, technical discussion that happens when 2 specialists meet and discover they speak the same language. He asked about my current projects. I told him about the herbal manuscript, the challenge of stabilizing the parchment without compromising the original binding structure. 20 minutes passed while we talked, standing near the windows, completely absorbed in the mechanics of preservation. I didn't see Victoria watching us. Didn't notice the way her jaw tightened, the way her fingers curled around her champagne flute, the way her eyes went flat and cold. If only I knew what I was walking into. When dinner was announced, I assumed Harrison would return to wherever he'd been originally seated. Instead, someone had rearranged the place cards, and he ended up directly across from me, continuing our conversation between courses. "You should come visit my facility," he said, enthusiasm clear in his voice. We've just installed a new system for large format document preservation. I think you'd find it fascinating, and frankly, we could use someone with your expertise on medieval materials. Have you ever considered consulting work? It was the kind of opportunity that could change a career. The kind of conversation that opened doors. Victoria, seated at the head of the table 5 chairs away, was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not anger, exactly. Something colder. The first course arrived, seared scallops with microgreens and citrus foam. I'll take the vegetarian option, please, I told the server immediately, before they could place the plate in front of me. The server looked confused. The vegetarian course is a mushroom risotto, miss. It comes later. That's fine. I can't eat shellfish. Victoria's voice carried down the table. Natalie, don't be difficult. Just eat around the scallops. I can't, I said quietly. Cross-contamination. Harrison was watching this exchange with interest, his expression thoughtful. My sister is very particular about food, Victoria announced to the table, her tone light but with an edge underneath. Allergies, sensitivities, special requirements. Always something. The server removed my plate and promised to bring the mushroom risotto early. I felt the familiar burn of embarrassment, the sense of being a problem, an inconvenience, a person who required special accommodations. But Harrison just said mildly, anaphylaxis is nothing to mess with. I keep an EpiPen in my jacket specifically because I've seen too many close calls at conferences and dinners. Better to be prepared. Something passed across Victoria's face, interest, maybe, or calculation. She smiled at Harrison, the dazzling smile she used when she wanted something. You're so thoughtful, she said. Not everyone understands how serious allergies can be. The irony of that statement wouldn't become clear until later. Dinner proceeded through multiple courses. My mushroom risotto arrived, perfectly prepared, completely safe. Harrison and I continued our conversation. He told me about a position opening up at his company, a senior conservator role focusing on medieval manuscripts and early modern documents, with a salary that was triple what I currently made. Think about it, he said, handing me his business card. I'm serious about the consultation work too. I'll have my assistant send you some information. Victoria's expression was carved from ice. The dessert course was announced, a selection of French pastries and a special chocolate tranche. I was starting to relax, thinking the evening was nearly over, that I'd somehow survived my sister's celebration dinner without major incident. The server placed a small cup of soup in front of me, described as a butternut squash and ginger amuse-bouche, a palate cleanser before dessert. This is the special preparation, the server said, smiling. Your sister requested it specifically for you. I looked down the table at Victoria. She was watching me, her expression unreadable. I thought you might enjoy something warm, she called out. You always loved butternut squash soup. I asked the chef to make a special batch, just for you. It was such an unexpected gesture of thoughtfulness that I felt tears prick at my eyes. Maybe I'd misread her expression earlier. Maybe she was actually trying to include me, to show affection in her own way. That's so sweet, I said, genuine warmth in my voice. Thank you, Victoria. She smiled, and something about it made my skin prickle with unease, but I pushed the feeling down. The soup was beautiful, silky smooth, garnished with what looked like crispy sage leaves and a drizzle of cream. The scent was rich and earthy, with the warm bite of ginger. I lifted the spoon to my lips. And that's when my throat began to close. I didn't see it happen, but I pieced it together later from witness statements and my lawyer's investigation. 3 days before the dinner, Victoria had sent a message to the event coordinator at Augustine's. My sister has severe allergies. Could we get a list of all ingredients used in the meal? I want to make sure everything is safe for her. The coordinator, impressed by Victoria's apparent concern, sent over detailed ingredient lists for every course. 2 days before the dinner, Victoria's search history showed specific queries: shrimp paste in Asian cooking, trace amounts shellfish allergy reaction, symptoms look like panic attack, how much shellfish causes anaphylaxis, can you hide shrimp taste in soup? 1 day before the dinner, Victoria called Augustine's chef directly. I have the phone records. The conversation lasted 12 minutes. According to the chef's later testimony, Victoria explained that she wanted to surprise me with a special soup that included traditional Asian flavors, because I'd recently expressed interest in Thai cuisine. She specifically requested that the butternut squash soup be enhanced with a small amount of shrimp paste, just for depth of flavor, nothing overpowering. The chef, a man named Philippe Marchand with 30 years of experience and a Michelin star, asked about allergies. Victoria assured him that I was fine with shellfish and that my previous restrictions had been due to a pregnancy that was now over. I have never been pregnant. But Philippe, busy with preparation for a high-profile dinner service, trusted the sister's word. He added approximately 1 tablespoon of shrimp paste to a small pot of butternut squash soup, enough for a single serving. He thought he was helping create a thoughtful surprise. The soup was delivered to me with Victoria's fabricated story about thoughtfulness and childhood favorites. And I, desperate for any scrap of affection from my sister, believed her. The first taste hit my system like poison because that's exactly what it was. To my body, shellfish proteins trigger an immediate and catastrophic immune response. I've tried to remember the exact sequence of events that followed, but anaphylaxis has a way of fragmenting memory. Everything becomes snapshots, disconnected moments. Snapshot: the taste of ginger and something else, something that made my tongue feel immediately wrong. Snapshot: dropping the spoon, hearing it clatter against the bowl. Snapshot: my throat beginning to swell, the sensation of my airway narrowing. Snapshot: reaching for my purse, my EpiPen, but my hands were already clumsy, my fine motor control disappearing. Snapshot: the wheezing sound coming from my throat, wet and desperate and animal. Snapshot: Victoria's face, her expression shifting from watchful to performative concern. Snapshot: her voice, clear and dismissive, she does this. She's always been dramatic. What I remember most clearly is the feeling of betrayal, sharper than the physical pain, more terrifying than the sensation of suffocation. Because in that moment, even as I was dying, I understood that this wasn't an accident. Victoria was watching me with the expression of someone observing an experiment, waiting to see results. I tried to stand, to get to my purse on the floor, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. I grabbed the edge of the table for support and the entire place setting rattled, crystal and china making delicate sounds that felt obscene given that I was dying. "Natalie, stop making a scene," Victoria said, her voice sharp. Someone near me, I couldn't see who through my darkening vision, said uncertainly, "I think she's actually choking." "She's fine," Victoria said firmly. "She just wants attention. She's done this before at family events." That was a lie. I had never done this. But Victoria said it with such confidence, such authority, that I could feel the room accepting her narrative. I was dying, and my sister was convincing people that I was performing. Then Harrison's voice cut through everything. "Someone call 911. Now." The next part happened fast. Harrison at my side, his hand steady on my shoulder. The burn of epinephrine injecting through my thigh, he'd gotten my dress out of the way somehow, administered the shot with practiced precision. Air rushing back into my lungs in painful gasps. "Breathe slowly," he said, his voice calm. "You're going to be fine." But over his shoulder, I could see Victoria's face, and the expression there was something I'd never seen before, genuine fear, mixed with calculation, the look of someone rapidly trying to revise their story. Harrison looked up at her, and his voice was no longer calm, it was cold with fury. "What the hell did you give her?" Victoria's mouth opened and closed. I didn't. "The soup," Harrison said, his voice cutting. "She reacted immediately after tasting that soup." "What was in it?" "Just butternut squash," Victoria said quickly. "I asked them to make it special for her. She loves butternut squash. Natalie has a severe shellfish allergy," Harrison interrupted, his tone factual. "I'm looking at hives forming across her face and neck. Her lips are swollen. This is classic anaphylaxis." That soup had shellfish in it. The room had gone completely silent. 23 people in designer clothing, holding expensive wine glasses, staring at my sister. Victoria's face cycled through expressions: shock, denial, confusion, each one perfectly performed. "No, that's impossible. I specifically told them about her allergies." "I would never." "You told the chef what?" Harrison's question was sharp. "I told them to make sure everything was safe," Victoria said, and her voice broke in exactly the right place. "I was trying to do something nice. I thought, maybe there was a mistake in the kitchen. This isn't my fault." I was still gasping, still trying to breathe properly, but I was conscious enough to watch my sister work. To see her construct her defense in real time. Harrison kept his hand on my shoulder, grounding and protective. "The paramedics are 2 minutes out," someone called. "Don't let them clean this up," I managed to whisper, my voice raw and strange. "The bowl. Don't let them take the bowl." Harrison's eyes sharpened. He looked at the soup bowl, still sitting on the table, mostly full. Then he looked back at Victoria with an expression that made her take a step backward. "Nobody touched that bowl," he said, his voice carrying authority. "That's evidence." Victoria laughed, the sound high and brittle. "Evidence? This was an accident. A terrible accident. You can't possibly think, I think," Harrison said slowly, "that you told your sister this soup was safe. I heard you say you'd requested it specially for her. And 30 seconds after she tasted it, she went into anaphylactic shock. So yes, Victoria, I think we need to preserve evidence." My mother had pushed through the crowd of frozen guests. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice shrill. "My daughter would never hurt her sister. This is some kind of terrible mistake. Natalie, tell them this was a mistake." I looked at my mother, then at Victoria, and I saw my whole childhood reflected in their faces, the golden child and the problem child, the one who mattered and the one who was supposed to stay quiet and grateful for whatever scraps of affection came her way. And I realized something in that moment, even as I struggled to breathe: my silence wasn't forgiveness. It was strategy. "Mistake," I whispered, the word costing me. "Don't call police." Relief flooded Victoria's face. My mother's expression shifted to approval. Finally, I was being reasonable, being the good daughter who protected the family. Harrison looked at me with surprise, but I held his gaze and tried to communicate everything I couldn't say aloud. "Not yet. Not here. I need evidence first." He hesitated, then nodded slightly. He understood. The paramedics arrived in a flurry of professional efficiency. They checked my vitals, administered a second dose of epinephrine, explained that I needed to go to the hospital for observation. Anaphylaxis can have a delayed secondary reaction. As they loaded me onto a stretcher, I looked back at the private dining room. Harrison was standing guard over my soup bowl. Victoria was surrounded by our parents, her face buried in our mother's shoulder, performing devastation. And I thought, she has no idea what's coming. That was my first small victory, the moment I decided to stop being the quiet sister who kept the peace, and became something much more dangerous. I became the kind of person who documents everything. The emergency room at St. Catherine's was fluorescent bright and sterile cold, the opposite of Augustine's amber elegance. I lay on a hospital bed while a nurse monitored my vitals and a doctor examined the hives that covered my arms and throat. "You're lucky your friend had an EpiPen," the doctor said, making notes on a tablet. "Without immediate intervention, severe anaphylaxis can be fatal within minutes. You understand that, yes?" "Yes," I said, my voice still raw. "What did you ingest?" "Butternut squash soup. But I have a severe shellfish allergy. I think there might have been cross-contamination." The doctor looked up sharply. "You think, or you know?" "I need to know for certain," I said carefully. "Is there a way to test what was in the soup? If you have a sample, we can send it for analysis." "But that would require..." He paused. "Do you suspect this was intentional?" I met his eyes. "I need to know what was in that soup." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I'll note in your chart that you want the substance tested. If someone brings in a sample, we can send it to the lab." 20 minutes later, Harrison Whitmore walked into my emergency room bay carrying a plastic container. Inside was my soup bowl, carefully preserved. "I told the restaurant this was potential evidence in a medical emergency," he said, setting it on the counter. "They weren't happy, but they understood the liability implications." "Thank you," I whispered. He pulled up a chair next to my bed. "Natalie, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Did Victoria know about your shellfish allergy?" "Yes." "Did she tell you that soup was safe?" "She said she'd requested it specially for me. That I'd always loved butternut squash soup." Harrison's jaw tightened. I was standing at the bar when the server came out of the kitchen with that bowl. "I saw Victoria point at you specifically, saw her say something to the server." The server nodded and walked directly to you with the soup. Something cold settled in my chest. "You saw her direct the server to me?" "Yes." "And Natalie, when you started reacting, before I intervened, Victoria wasn't calling for help. She was watching. Just watching." We sat in silence for a moment. "I'm going to ask the restaurant for their security footage," Harrison said quietly. "And I'm going to ask some questions about how that soup was prepared. If this was what I think it was, you need to press charges." "Not yet," I said. "Why not?" "Because I need to be sure. I need documentation. I stopped, trying to articulate what I was feeling. "I work with fragile things. Before you repair something, you document everything. You photograph the damage. You test the materials. You build a complete record. Otherwise, later, people can claim you caused the damage yourself." Harrison's expression shifted to understanding. "You're building a case." "I'm documenting what happened." "Smart," he said. "Do you have a lawyer?" "No." "I'll send you some names." He stood, then paused. "I've worked in conservation for 30 years, Natalie. I've seen people destroy priceless artifacts through carelessness, and I've seen people destroy them through malice. The documentation is always what proves the difference." After he left, I lay in the hospital bed and thought about Victoria. My sister had always been jealous of anything I received: attention, praise, opportunities. But this was different. This was premeditated. This was attempted murder dressed up as thoughtfulness. And she'd almost gotten away with it. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother: "Victoria is devastated. She's beside herself. Please call her and tell her you forgive her. This was an honest mistake and she needs to know you don't blame her." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I texted back, "I'm being monitored for secondary reaction. We'll call tomorrow." I didn't forgive her. I didn't blame myself for her devastation. And I was absolutely going to make sure she faced consequences. But first, I needed to know exactly what she'd done. The next morning, a nurse brought me my breakfast and the results of the soup analysis. The lab had found exactly what I expected: butternut squash, ginger, cream, sage, and approximately 1 tablespoon of concentrated shrimp paste. Enough to kill someone with severe allergies, the doctor said when he came to discharge me. This wasn't trace contamination. This was a significant amount of allergen. Can you put that in writing? Already done. The report will be part of your medical records. I was discharged with prescriptions, instructions, and follow-up appointments. But what I really needed was sitting in my email inbox when I got home: a message from Harrison with contact information for 3 lawyers who specialized in intentional torts and assault cases. I called the first one, a woman named Margaret Chen, whose reputation made opposing counsel nervous. "Ms. Brennan," she said when her assistant connected us. "Harrison Whitmore gave me a brief overview of your situation. Can you tell me exactly what happened?" I told her everything, starting with Victoria's jealous reaction to Harrison's attention, ending with the soup bowl now in police evidence storage. Margaret was quiet for a moment after I finished. "Then, you understand this wasn't an accident?" "Yes." "You understand your sister deliberately poisoned you?" The word hung in the air between us: poisoned. It sounded melodramatic, like something from a Gothic novel. But it was also accurate. "Yes," I said. "Good. Because the first thing we need to establish is that you're not confused about what happened. The second thing we need to establish is documentation. Harrison mentioned you preserved the evidence?" "The soup bowl is at the hospital. The lab results are in my medical records. Harrison saw Victoria direct the server to bring me that specific bowl." "And you can prove Victoria knew about your allergies?" "Medical records going back to childhood. Family emails discussing my allergies. My parents are both listed as emergency contacts on my allergy information forms." "Excellent. I'm going to need you to write down everything you remember, in chronological order. Every conversation, every interaction. Especially anything Victoria said before or during the dinner. Can you do that?" "I document things for a living," I said. "Yes. One more question: why didn't you want to call the police at the scene?" I took a breath. "Because I wanted to build an airtight case first. I wanted documentation that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. And I wanted to give my family enough rope to hang themselves." There was a smile in Margaret's voice. "Ms. Brennan, I think we're going to work very well together." Over the next week, Margaret and I built a case that was as thoroughly documented as any manuscript restoration I'd ever completed. We obtained the lab analysis proving the presence of shrimp paste in the soup, my complete medical history documenting my shellfish allergy, security footage from Augustine's showing Victoria speaking to the event coordinator, then later to Chef Philippe phone records showing Victoria's call to the restaurant, the event coordinator's testimony about Victoria's request for ingredient lists, Chef Philippe's testimony about the phone call, and Victoria's specific instructions to add shrimp paste. But the most damning evidence came from Victoria's own phone. Margaret filed a subpoena for Victoria's text messages and internet history. And there it was, documented in searchable timestamps: day -3. Shrimp paste in soup recipes, day -3. How much shellfish causes allergic reaction, day -2. Can anaphylaxis look like panic attack, day -2. Symptoms of shellfish poisoning, day -2. Hiding seafood taste in vegetable soup. She'd researched it. She'd planned it. She'd known exactly what she was doing. The message thread between Victoria and her best friend was even more damning. Victoria: "That Harrison guy spent the whole cocktail hour talking to Nat about books. At MY's celebration dinner. Can you believe that? Friend: That's so rude, Victoria, she's always doing this. Always finding ways to make things about her. I'm so sick of it. Friend: What are you going to do?" Victoria: "I'll think of something." 3 hours later, Victoria had called Augustine's chef. Margaret compiled everything into a comprehensive brief. Medical documentation. Witness statements. Physical evidence. Search history. Text messages. A complete timeline showing premeditation. This is attempted murder, Margaret said when we reviewed the documents. Or at minimum, aggravated assault with intent to cause serious bodily harm. The DA would absolutely prosecute. What's the sentence for something like this? In this state? With premeditation and use of a weapon, which poison legally qualifies as, we're looking at 8 to 15 years in prison. I thought about Victoria in prison. Orange jumpsuits and concrete cells and bars. It wasn't what I wanted. What are my other options? I asked. Margaret leaned back in her chair, studying me. You want civil litigation instead. I want her to lose everything that matters to her. Her career, her reputation, her financial security. Prison would almost be easier, she'd be a victim then, someone who made a terrible mistake and paid for it. I want her to walk free and watch everything she built crumble around her. That, Margaret said slowly, is much more satisfying. And legally, we can absolutely do that. But you need to understand, civil cases don't have the same weight. If we go civil instead of criminal, she never goes to prison. Can I file criminal charges later if I need to? Yes. The statute of limitations gives you several years. Then let's start with civil. I want her money, her career, and her reputation. In that order. Margaret smiled, the expression sharp and professional. Then let's talk about damages. My family believed I was recovering and deciding to forgive. My mother called every day, her voice anxious and pleading. Victoria is devastated, Natalie. She's beside herself. Please call her and tell her you forgive her. This was an honest mistake and she needs to know you don't blame her for this terrible accident. I'm focusing on my health right now, I said, my voice carefully neutral. Of course. But maybe you could send her a text. Just to let her know you're not angry. I'll think about it. What I was actually doing was working with Margaret to calculate damages. Medical expenses are straightforward, Margaret explained, spreading documents across her conference table. Emergency room visit, ambulance, follow-up appointments, therapy for trauma. We're looking at around $40,000 in direct costs. That's not enough. Margaret smiled. I'm not finished. We have lost wages from time off work, though given your job security, that's minimal. But then we get into the interesting damages. Pain and suffering, emotional distress, loss of enjoyment of life, and, this is the important one, punitive damages. Explain punitive. Punitive damages are designed to punish the defendant for particularly egregious conduct and deter similar behavior in the future. Premeditated poisoning absolutely qualifies. We can ask for substantial punitive damages. How substantial? Based on the evidence and Victoria's income? I think we can make a case for $750,000. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. That would destroy her financially. Yes, Margaret said simply. It would. Is that what you want? I thought about Victoria watching me choke, telling a room full of witnesses that I was being dramatic. I thought about her internet searches, her calculated planning, her complete lack of remorse. Yes, I said. That's exactly what I want. While Margaret built the legal case, I returned to work. The Preservation Institute welcomed me back with genuine concern. My boss had sent flowers to the hospital, my colleagues had covered my projects, everyone treated me with careful kindness. I worked on the 1543 herbal manuscript, repairing water damage with the same methodical precision I was using to document Victoria's destruction. The work was meditative, testing parchment for stability, mixing wheat starch paste for fills, carefully lifting and supporting fragile leaves. I work with fragile things. I know how to protect them. Harrison called twice during that first week back. The first time to check on my health, the second to formally offer me a consulting position. "The position is yours if you want it," he said. 3 days a week, full benefits, salary of $90,000 annually. You'd be working on our medieval manuscript collection and training our preservation team on historical techniques. It was more than double my current salary. It was the kind of opportunity that would transform my career. "When do you need an answer?" "Take your time." "But Natalie," I meant what I said at dinner. "Your work is exceptional. This isn't charity. This is me wanting the best conservator I can find." After we hung up, I sat in my climate-controlled workshop, surrounded by careful tools and damaged beautiful things waiting to be restored, and I made a decision. I was going to take that job. I was going to use the settlement money from Victoria to fund my own business eventually. And I was going to build something extraordinary from the ashes of her attempt to destroy me. But first, I had to sit through mediation. My parents had been calling constantly, their voices cycling through anger, pleading, and guilt. "How can you do this to your sister?" my father demanded during one call. "She made a mistake. A terrible, horrible mistake, but it was still a mistake. You're going to destroy her life over an accident?" "It wasn't an accident," I said quietly. "Of course it was. She would never deliberately hurt you. Your sisters." "Dad, she researched how to poison me. The internet searches are time-stamped. She planned this for 3 days." Silence on the other end. "Then, that doesn't prove anything. People search things out of curiosity. It doesn't mean," she told the chef to add shrimp paste to soup she knew I would eat. "She told him I was fine with shellfish. She lied to get him to poison me." "You're being dramatic." I'd heard those words my entire life. Victoria's constant refrain, echoed by our parents whenever I had the audacity to need something, to take up space, to exist inconveniently. "I nearly died," I said. "That's not dramatic. That's factual. And Victoria has apologized. She's devastated. What more do you want from her?" "Everything," I thought. "I want everything she has." But what I said was, I want her to face consequences. My mother tried a different approach. She came to my apartment unannounced, her face carefully made up, her clothing expensive and tasteful. "Natalie, sweetheart, we need to talk about this lawsuit." "There's nothing to talk about. $750,000? That's not about justice, that's about revenge." I looked at my mother, this woman who had spent 26 years making it clear that I was the disappointing daughter, the one who worked with dusty books instead of doing something impressive. "You're right," I said. "It is about revenge. Victoria tried to kill me because she was jealous. And she would have gotten away with it if Harrison hadn't been there. So yes, I want revenge. I want her to understand that actions have consequences. She's your sister. She was my sister. Now she's someone who tried to murder me. There's a difference." My mother's face hardened. "If you go through with this lawsuit, you're destroying this family. Your father and I won't be able to show our faces at the club. Victoria's career will be over. Is that what you want?" I thought about all the times I'd been told to be quiet, to not make a fuss, to let Victoria shine. All the times my accomplishments had been dismissed as trivial while Victoria's most minor achievements were celebrated. "Yes," I said. "That's exactly what I want." She left without another word. Margaret sent the official demand letter 2 weeks after the incident. Victoria had a choice: settle for $750,000 in damages, or face a civil trial where all the evidence, the searches, the texts, the witness testimonies, the premeditation, would become public record. The letter also noted that I was reserving the right to pursue criminal charges, which could result in 8 to 15 years in prison for attempted murder. Victoria's response came through her lawyer, a hasty hire, someone her parents had found through their country club connections. He tried to negotiate, $50,000, take it or leave it. His client was being generous. Margaret's response was surgical. Your client researched poison methods, lied to a chef to introduce allergens into food, and watched my client suffocate while telling witnesses she was faking. The evidence shows clear premeditation and intent. $750,000, or we go to trial and add the criminal charges. You have 72 hours to decide. 48 hours later, Victoria's lawyer called back. They'd agreed to mediation. The mediation took place in a conference room at Margaret's law firm, neutral territory with recording equipment and a professional mediator. I arrived early, dressed in a simple navy suit, carrying a leather portfolio. I looked like exactly what I was, a professional woman who took her work seriously. Victoria arrived 15 minutes late. She wore a soft pink sweater set, minimal makeup, and pearl earrings, an outfit calculated to make her look young, vulnerable, innocent. Her eyes were red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. Our parents flanked her like bodyguards. The mediator, a woman named Susan Park with 30 years of experience in civil litigation, gestured for everyone to sit. Before we begin, Susan said, I want to clarify the purpose of this mediation. We're here to discuss settlement of Ms. Brennan's civil claim against Ms. Victoria Brennan for intentional infliction of emotional distress, assault, and battery. Ms. Brennan has also reserved the right to pursue criminal charges. Does everyone understand? Victoria's lawyer nodded. My father looked furious. My mother was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Ms. Brennan has provided extensive documentation, Susan continued, opening a folder. I've reviewed the materials. Chef Philippe's testimony regarding the phone call and specific instructions. Security footage. Internet search history. Text messages. Medical records. Witness statements. The lab analysis of the soup. She looked at Victoria. Ms. Victoria Brennan, before we proceed, do you dispute any of these facts? Victoria's lawyer started to speak, but Victoria interrupted, her voice small and wavering. It wasn't supposed to be that bad. I just thought, maybe she'd feel a little sick. Get a little attention. I didn't know it would be so serious. The room went completely silent. Her lawyer closed his eyes in evident pain. Margaret leaned forward slightly, her expression neutral, but I could see the satisfaction in her eyes. Victoria had just admitted intent. So you acknowledge, Susan said carefully, that you deliberately caused your sister to ingest an allergen? I didn't mean for her to almost die, Victoria said, tears streaming down her face now. I was just so angry. She was supposed to be there to celebrate me, and instead Harrison spent the whole evening talking to her about stupid books, and everyone was paying attention to her instead of me, and I wanted her to feel bad for once. To know what it's like to be overlooked. My mother made a small sound of distress. My father said, Victoria, stop talking. But she couldn't stop. The words poured out of her like poison draining from a wound. I'm not a bad person. I'm not. I just made one mistake. One stupid mistake because I was hurt and angry. And now she wants to destroy my entire life over it? That's not fair. I apologized. I said I was sorry. What more does she want from me? I let her finish. Let her perform her breakdown for the mediator and the recording equipment. Then I spoke for the first time since entering the room. You researched how to poison me for 3 days. You lied to a chef to contaminate my food. You told witnesses I was faking while I was dying. You showed no remorse until you were caught. And you still think this was one mistake that deserves forgiveness? Victoria looked at me, her eyes wide and wet. Nat, please. I'm your sister. We're family. You were my sister, I said quietly. Now you're someone who tried to kill me because you were jealous. There's a difference. Margaret opened her portfolio and pulled out a thick document. I've prepared a settlement agreement. Ms. Victoria Brennan will pay Ms. Natalie Brennan $750,000 in damages, paid in monthly installments over 3 years. The first payment of $25,000 is due immediately, with subsequent monthly payments of $20,000 until the full amount is paid. That's impossible, my father said. Victoria doesn't have that kind of money. Then she'll need to arrange financing, Margaret said calmly. Or face criminal charges with a potential sentence of 8 to 15 years in prison. Victoria's lawyer cleared his throat. My client's annual salary is $90,000. After taxes, she can't afford $20,000 monthly payments. Then I suggest she find additional income sources, liquidate assets, or request assistance from family members. Margaret pulled out another document. Alternatively, if Mr. and Mrs. Brennan are willing to co-sign and guarantee the payments, we can structure a secured agreement. My father looked like he'd been slapped. You want us to pay for Victoria's mistake? I want Victoria to pay, I said. But if she can't afford it, and you'd prefer she not face criminal charges, then yes, you can help her pay. My mother was staring at me with something that might have been respect or might have been horror. You really would let them arrest her? In a heartbeat. The mediation lasted 4 hours. Victoria cried. My parents argued. Her lawyer tried various negotiation tactics. But the mathematics were simple, $750,000 or prison. In the end, they signed. Victoria would liquidate her investment accounts and savings, approximately $100,000. My parents would co-sign for the remainder, with their house as collateral. The payments would be reported to credit agencies, destroying Victoria's credit rating. And if a single payment was late by more than 15 days, I could immediately file criminal charges. One more thing, Margaret said as we prepared to sign the final documents. Ms. Victoria Brennan will provide a written apology, to be entered into the official record, acknowledging her actions and accepting full responsibility. No minimization. No excuses. Victoria's hand shook as she wrote it. The final text was brief. I deliberately contaminated Natalie's food with an allergen I knew could kill her. I did this because I was jealous of the attention she was receiving. I lied to the chef. I watched her suffer. I am completely responsible for my actions. She signed it. The mediator notarized it. It became part of the permanent legal record. As we stood to leave, my mother grabbed my arm. How can you do this to us? To your own family? I looked at her hand on my arm, then at her face. You stood by and watched Victoria try to destroy me my entire life. You celebrated her cruelty and punished me for reacting to it. This isn't me doing something to you. This is me finally protecting myself from you. I walked out of that conference room and didn't look back. The first payment cleared 2 weeks later. $25,000, appearing in my bank account like magic. I stared at the number on my screen for a long time, feeling nothing in particular. Not triumph, not satisfaction. Just a quiet sense of completion, like finishing the last page of careful conservation work and knowing the manuscript was stable, protected, ready for another 500 years. I'd already accepted Harrison's job offer. The work was extraordinary: medieval manuscripts, incunabula, documents of historical significance that required the kind of careful attention I'd spent my career developing. The salary was transformative. The respect was genuine. But what I really wanted was independence. I met with a business advisor, a woman named Patricia who specialized in helping professionals transition from employment to entrepreneurship. "You want to start your own conservation practice," she said, reviewing my notes. "Specializing in medieval and early modern manuscripts, serving museums, universities, and private collectors." "Yes." "What's your seed capital?" $750,000, paid over 3 years. Her eyebrows rose. "That's a substantial amount." "Inheritance?" "Settlement from a civil suit." She didn't ask for details, just nodded and pulled up financial projections. "With that kind of capital, you can build something significant. Commercial space with proper climate control, specialized equipment, professional staff. You could be operational within 6 months and profitable within 2 years." We spent 3 hours mapping out a business plan. By the time I left her office, I had a clear vision: Brennan Conservation, a boutique practice focusing on historically significant documents, with a reputation for meticulous work and absolute integrity. I would build an empire from the ashes of my sister's jealousy. Victoria, meanwhile, was falling apart. I didn't have to dig for information. It came to me through professional networks and mutual acquaintances who didn't realize they were gossip sources. Pemberton Industries had terminated her employment for personal conduct incompatible with company values. HR had been quiet about the details, but word spread quickly in corporate circles. An executive who deliberately poisoned her sister wasn't someone anyone wanted representing their brand. She'd applied to 17 different companies over 2 months. No callbacks. The background checks turned up the civil suit and mediation records. Her carefully curated social media presence, all aesthetic coffee drinks and motivational quotes about ambition, had gone dark. And then came the relationship. Victoria met someone at a networking event, Marcus Hartley, a venture capitalist with family money and an impressive resume. According to mutual friends, he was charmed by her immediately. Drawn to her apparent vulnerability, her story of overcoming a difficult family situation. She moved into his condo within 6 weeks. Posted carefully staged photos of champagne and city views. Performed happiness with the same precision she'd once performed remorse. I watched from a distance, curious about how long it would take. 3 months. That's how long it took for Marcus to discover the truth. He hired a private investigator, standard practice for someone with his level of wealth before making relationship decisions permanent. The investigator found the civil suit records, the mediation documents, Victoria's written confession. Marcus called me directly. Harrison had given him my number. "Ms. Brennan," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "I apologize for the intrusion. I'm calling regarding your sister Victoria." "What about her?" "I've recently learned about events that took place earlier this year. A civil suit regarding an incident at a restaurant. I wanted to verify the facts before taking action. I could have lied. Could have told him it was a misunderstanding, a family dispute blown out of proportion. Instead, I sent him the complete mediation record. 2 days later, Victoria was homeless. Marcus had not only ended the relationship but had contacted mutual friends and business associates to warn them about her documented history of premeditated violence. She moved back in with our parents, into her childhood bedroom with the pink wallpaper and participation trophies. My mother called, her voice shrill with fury. "You told Marcus everything. You deliberately sabotaged Victoria's chance at happiness. He asked for the truth. I provided documentation. She was finally moving forward. Finally rebuilding. And you destroyed it. She destroyed herself when she poisoned me. I'm just making sure the consequences stick. My father sent an email, you've become someone I don't recognize. Cold. Calculating. Cruel. Your sister made one mistake and you've turned it into a campaign of destruction. I'm ashamed to call you my daughter. I read the email 3 times, feeling nothing. Then I blocked both of their email addresses and phone numbers. The monthly payments continued arriving, precisely on schedule. $20,000, every 30th of the month, for 36 months. I used it to build Brennan Conservation. I found a perfect space, a converted warehouse in the Arts District with massive windows, high ceilings, and bones that could support the environmental controls necessary for document preservation. The rent was reasonable because the space needed extensive renovation. I hired contractors who understood the requirements: climate control systems, air filtration, specialized lighting, security systems designed for valuable artifacts. I hired 2 junior conservators fresh from graduate programs, demolished and hungry for experience. I invested in equipment, microscopes, environmental monitors, specialized tools, archival materials. Harrison sent me my first 3 major clients, museums and universities that needed expert conservation work and were willing to pay premium rates for it. Within 8 months, Brennan Conservation was profitable. Within 14 months, I was turning away projects because we were booked 6 months in advance. Within 20 months, I hired 2 more conservators and moved into a larger space. By the time the final payment from Victoria cleared, the 36th payment, marking 3 years since mediation, my business was valued at $2.7 million. I'd turned $750,000 in settlement money into an empire built on expertise, reputation, and the kind of meticulous attention to detail that comes from understanding exactly how fragile things can break. I never reached out to Victoria. Never checked her social media, never asked mutual friends about her situation. But information still reached me anyway. She was working at a tax preparation franchise in a strip mall, making $14 an hour. Living with our parents in her childhood bedroom. Her career in marketing was over. No company would touch her after the background checks revealed the civil suit. She'd tried to restart her social media presence multiple times, always deleting the accounts after a few weeks when engagement was non-existent. Our parents had downsized significantly after paying off the settlement. Their house had been remortgaged twice to cover the payments, and they'd eventually sold it for something much smaller. The last I heard, they were both still working despite being retirement age, still bitter, still blaming me for not forgiving and forgetting. But their opinions had become something distant and irrelevant, voices from a country I'd emigrated from, speaking a language I no longer needed to understand. I would show her what happens when you push someone who has spent their whole life being careful. And I had. 1 year after the final settlement payment cleared, I stood in my conservation studio on a Tuesday morning, surrounded by the quiet sounds of meaningful work. Dust motes drifted through slanted sunlight from the massive north-facing windows. The air smelled of aged paper and lemon oil, wheat starch paste and leather dressing, the particular scent of careful restoration, of taking broken beautiful things and making them whole again. I was working on a project that had arrived the week before, a 1,532 book of hours with illuminated margins, water-damaged and foxed, the vellum pages fragile as moth wings. The client was a private collector who'd noting me specifically because Harrison Whitmore had recommended my work. My junior conservators, both now confident professionals after 2 years of training, were at their own workstations, treating separate projects with careful precision. Soft classical music played from hidden speakers. The temperature was a constant 68 degrees, the humidity held steady at 45%. This was my empire. My sanctuary. My life. My phone buzzed with a notification. The final settlement payment had fully cleared escrow, 3 years of monthly payments, completed exactly on schedule, every legal obligation satisfied. I felt nothing in particular. Not satisfaction, not triumph, not even relief. Just a quiet sense of completion, like turning the last page of a project log and knowing the documentation was complete. I set down my tools and walked to the window, looking out at the arts district below. Other converted warehouses, galleries, studios, a community of people who made beautiful things, who understood the value of careful work. Somewhere across the city, Victoria was probably at her tax franchise, helping someone navigate deduction schedules for $14 an hour. Our parents were probably at work, still bitter about the daughter who'd refused to play along with their narrative. But I didn't think about them often anymore. They'd become irrelevant, problems I'd solved through documentation and strategic action, then archived in my memory like completed projects. My phone rang. Harrison. Natalie, I have a potential client for you. Getty Museum, medieval manuscript collection, significant water damage from a recent pipe break. 6-figure restoration project. Are you interested? Send me the details, I said. Already done. They want to meet with you next week. I told them you're the best manuscript conservator on the East Coast. Thank you, Harrison. Thank you for making me right. After we hung up, I returned to my workstation. The book of hours lay open under careful lights, its damaged pages waiting for attention. I work with fragile things. I understand how they break, how damage spreads when left untreated, how sometimes the only way to preserve something precious is to remove the harmful elements completely. I'd learned that lesson in my professional work long before I'd needed to apply it to family relationships. But the principle was the same: identify the damage, document everything, remove the harmful agents, stabilize what remains, and build something stronger from the foundation that survives. Victoria had been a harmful agent. Premeditated jealousy mixed with casual cruelty, corroding our relationship until the only option was complete removal. I'd removed her. I'd documented everything. I'd built something extraordinary from the settlement money she'd paid. And now I was exactly where I'd always wanted to be, respected in my field, financially independent, surrounded by meaningful work and people who valued precision and integrity. The dust motes continued their slow dance through the sunlight. Outside, the city moved through its ordinary Tuesday rhythms. Inside my studio, 3 conservators treated centuries-old documents with careful attention, preserving fragments of history for future generations. My life was whole now. Brilliant. Built on the foundation of boundaries I'd finally learned to enforce. I picked up my tools and returned to work, treating the damaged vellum with patient precision, one careful repair at a time. That evening, after my conservators had left, I received one final piece of information about Victoria, a message from a former colleague who didn't know about the history. Ran into your sister at the coffee shop. She looked rough. Asked if I had any job leads in marketing. Felt bad for her, seems like she's really struggling. I read the message twice, then deleted it without responding. She had tried to kill me because I'd received attention she thought belonged to her. She had researched methods, planned the execution, watched me suffocate while telling witnesses I was being dramatic. And now she was struggling. That was what happened when you weaponized someone's medical condition. When you mistook quietness for weakness. When you assumed the careful person wouldn't fight back. I locked the studio. And walked to my car, a practical sedan, nothing flashy, because I'd learned that real wealth was the kind that bought freedom and security, not status symbols. As I drove home to my apartment in a neighborhood I actually liked, past the coffee shop where I knew every barista's name, I thought about the question Victoria had asked in mediation: what more do you want from me? I'd wanted her to understand that actions have consequences. That attempting murder, even against a quiet sibling, even out of jealousy, even with an apology afterward, meant losing everything that mattered. I'd wanted her career destroyed, her financial security eliminated, her carefully constructed image shattered. And I'd gotten exactly that. Not through violence. Not through public confrontation. Through documentation, legal process, strategic patience, and the same careful precision I used to repair 500-year-old manuscripts. My silence hadn't been forgiveness. It had been strategy. And it had worked. I preserve what's precious, medieval documents, historical artifacts, my own boundaries and peace. I eliminate harmful agents, whether they're iron gall ink eating through 16th century vellum or toxicity in blood relations. The principle is the same. The results are permanent. And I sleep perfectly well at night, in my quiet apartment, surrounded by books I've restored, dreaming about projects I'll complete tomorrow. Victoria tried to poison me because I'd received attention. I'd turned her attempt into the foundation of an empire. There's a certain poetry in that, the kind that only becomes clear in retrospect, like discovering the artist's corrections hidden under layers of paint in an illuminated manuscript. She'd meant to destroy me. Instead, she'd funded exactly the life I'd always wanted. And that, I thought as I fell asleep that night, was the most satisfying revenge of all. If you liked this story, feel free to subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next one.